We live in an age of his value by how many friends he's collected on a screen. And yet, never before have men been so alone. There are, of course, exceptions, those rare friendships that hold the weight of true brotherhood. Buddies who know not just how many goals Manchester United scored, but the silence between those goals. For every man who can name a true confidant, there are 8, perhaps more, who carry the burden of isolation. Men who, in the privacy of their thoughts, know they have no one they could call at 2 a.m. Because what we're witnessing isn't strength. It is a generation of men starving for something they were never taught to name. Friendship that nourishes the soul, and yet for many it feels as unreachable as the moon. The real tragedy: most men don't even know they're starving, because they've been taught to call their hunger strength. No one who truly sees them, no one who truly knows them. For most men, the longing for connection, the need to cry, the desire to be held not just sexually, but emotionally, is exiled to the shadow, and what's left on the surface is a performance. Competence without communion, power without intimacy. Men who understand the language of laughter and the gravity behind a sigh. But if we speak plainly without embellishment or evasion, such friendships are rare. As Warren Farrell writes in The Boy Crisis, modern men are facing a quiet epidemic, not just of loneliness, but of meaninglessness. Boys grow up with fewer role models, more emotional neglect, and a culture that doesn't teach them how to live or even speak. Most men carry a secret they never speak aloud: the aching absence of connection. This isn't merely a personal problem, it's a collective condition. And so they adapt, they armor up, they perform. They become who the world told them to be: strong, silent, capable. But underneath the armor, a deeper self is buried alive. Carl Jung would describe this buried self as the shadow, the hidden part of our psyche, made up of everything we deny, suppress, or fear. We marvel at how quiet men have become, how emotionally distant, how stoic. But perhaps we should stop marveling and start mourning. Real male friendship isn't just a bonus in life, it's a lifeline. The tragedy of modern man is not that he is unwilling to connect to this, that he has been trained not to. From the time he is a boy, he is handed a mask, and behind that mask, friendship suffocates. Don't feel too much, don't talk too much, don't need too much. The mask says, be tough, don't cry, don't need anyone. This mask becomes his identity, it becomes his protection, but it also becomes his prison. In The Mask of Masculinity, Lewis Howes breaks down the disguises men wear to survive. The stoic mask, which tells men emotions are weakness. The alpha mask, which demands dominance over vulnerability. They reward a man for hiding, not for revealing, for achieving, not for connecting. The material mask, which hides emptiness behind success. Each of these masks is a strategy to be seen as strong, but they all come at the same cost: isolation. Carl Jung warned of this danger. He believed that what is repressed will eventually return, not as a whisper but as a wound. What is not faced consciously becomes fate. The man who buries his need for intimacy, for softness, for friendship doesn't kill that need. He only drives it into the unconscious, where it festers. It emerges in the form of anxiety, depression, rage, or addiction. But he didn't say to live behind it forever. The mask was meant to conceal one's depth temporarily, not to become a grave that buries it. It haunts him in his restlessness and clings to him in his silence. They lose their real selves behind performance. And worst of all, they lose each other. Because when everyone is acting, no one connects. In war or politics, perhaps that holds true. But in the human soul, fear isolates while love binds. And the man who never learns to remove it will die celebrated, admired, and utterly alone. And when a man follows this Machiavellian script in his personal life, when he believes that love makes him soft, he becomes a ruler over a kingdom of one, himself, alone. Jung called this the shadow self. It is the unloved, unspoken, and unacceptable part of us, especially dangerous when it is mistaken for strength. Because friendship, real friendship, cannot exist without vulnerability. And vulnerability is the one thing the mask will never allow. And so the man becomes split. On the outside calm, composed, capable. On the inside, hungry, hurting, human. But here lies the deeper irony. To wear the mask of masculinity too well is to become incapable of friendship. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than to be loved." Nietzsche saw this coming too. He wrote, "Every profound spirit needs a mask." In today's world, men confuse masks for identity. Until the mask is questioned, friendship will remain a stranger. Men have always been allowed to gather but not always to connect. We see them in bars, locker rooms, boardrooms, golf courses. Together, yes, but emotionally worlds apart. A man can spend hours debating Premier League stats, exploring the S&P 500's historical returns, or analyzing the influence of Greek philosophy on modern art, and still go home starving, not for food or facts but for felt presence. These kinds of conversations can simulate connection, but they don't create it. Real connection happens in the basement where the raw, the painful, and the intimate dwell. In Iron John, Poet and mythologist Robert Bly points out that modern men have inherited a world that lacks initiative, but how to feel, not even in discussing the symbolic weight of Picasso's late period. But in the moment a man says, boys are taught to become men through success, conquests, and logic, but they are rarely taught emotional fluency. It's not that these discussions are meaningless, they are rich, even beautiful, but they are safe, they are sterile. They don't ask anything of the soul, and in a way, many men are emotionally dead long before they die because no one has ever taught them how to live in the full spectrum of themselves. They are rarely guided into depth, because the former can make you popular but only the latter can make you known. Instead, many become knowledge warriors, men who use intellect as armor, who dominate through ideas but retreat from emotional honesty. Carl Jung would say this is a life lived in the upper floor of the psyche where thought reigns, but feeling is banished, and that's where friendship lives. Not in quoting Plato's The Laws or debating the trajectory of hypersonic flight. I don't think I can do this anymore. The silence in my apartment feels like it's eating me alive. I'm afraid I'm becoming a stranger to myself. Nietzsche once observed, some men are born posthumously. The intellect is a powerful tool, but when used as a shield, it blocks the very thing it was meant to enhance, truthful communion. Men must learn the difference between speaking with someone and speaking from themselves. Until men descend from their heads into their hearts, friendship will remain an idea they can define but never experience. True friendship begins at the precise moment we drop the act. Not when we impress someone, not when we agree with them, but when we dare to reveal something that could cost us approval. It begins when one man says to another, I'm going out of my mind. I'm scared all the time. I can't stand who I've become. Help me. But vulnerability, though it's the gateway to friendship, is terrifying, because men have been conditioned to see it as death. In Jungian psychology, this fear of exposure is rooted in what Jung called the shadow, the hidden, rejected aspect of the self that we push out of consciousness. For most men, the shadow contains all the emotions they were taught to fear. Sadness, fear, neediness, tenderness, confusion, even love. They pretend to be in control when they're unraveling. They laugh when they want to cry. They distract when they should reach out. They perform, they protect, but they do not connect. The shadow is made up of everything they've been told is unmanly, and so they hide it. They pretend to be confident when they're afraid. As Jung said, many men become what he calls nice guys, not actually nice, but emotionally repressed, approval-seeking, conflict-avoidant, and disconnected from their own needs. They wear a polished smile, but beneath it is shame, and a gnawing desire to be loved as they are, not as they perform. Guilt, a quiet rage. It clears away the polite lies and invites the sacred risk of saying, here I am, do you see me? Vulnerability invites that truth. They are being, and from that raw place, true friendship is born. Not who I pretend to be, not who I'm trying to become, just me. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What men don't realize is that this very act of repression is what keeps them stuck, bitter, exhausted, only praised, or feared, or envied, but not loved. And in a world of surface-level approval, real is revolutionary. And alone, Robert Glover, in No More Mr. Nice Guy, explains this dynamic in modern terms. And if he cannot be known, he will never feel loved. But how can anyone love what they never see? How can anyone truly be your friend if you only ever show them the edited version? And here lies the cost. Until a man risks being seen, Nietzsche once said, the man of knowledge must be able not only to love his enemies, but also to hate his friends. What did he mean? That friendship isn't built on comfort. It's built on truth, even uncomfortable truth. That moment is rare. But when it happens, when two men lower their shields and enter into mutual vulnerability, they are no longer performing. It's not glamorous, it's not always pretty, but it is real. From the earliest stories we tell our sons, the lesson is clear. A real man stands tall. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't cry. He doesn't need. He is the hero who doesn't break under pressure, the warrior who buries his pain, the leader who never wavers, the seducer who never hesitates. He gets the girl, wins the war, conquers the world, and does it all without asking for help. But beneath this glossy mythology lies a silent tragedy, because no matter how often the world repeats it, it's a lie. No man is invulnerable, and pretending to be has cost generations their health, their wholeness, and their friendships. Machiavelli famously wrote that it is safer to be feared than loved. For rulers, perhaps, but for men navigating real life, that advice has proven fatal to connection. When men internalize fear over love, they choose dominance over vulnerability. He wrote of the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society, and warned that the more we identify with it, the more we lose touch with the truth of who we are. If a man becomes his mask, stoic, unshakable, unbothered, he forgets how to feel, how to ask, how to need, and soon he forgets how to love. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. They learn to compete, not confide. They hide their wounds under armor because to be wounded is to be weak. And nothing, in the mythology of masculinity, is more disgraceful than weakness. The Bemensch that evolved man isn't the one who never falters. He's the one who transcends shame, the one who integrates all parts of himself, even the weak, frightened, and broken ones. Power is not in suppression. It's in integration. Carl Jung saw how this ideal of the invulnerable man fractures the psyche, because love requires vulnerability. To be soft, to say, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not okay, in the will to change. Bell Hooks calls out the emotional straitjacket placed on men by patriarchy. She writes, the first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence toward women, and what dies along with that is the man's ability to be present. Nietzsche, despite his love for power, also spoke of the need for transformation. So why do men keep pretending? Because they're afraid that if they break the myth, they'll be rejected, ridiculed, labeled, weak, childish, or worst of all, feminine. And that is the final insult in the false doctrine of manhood, that to feel is to be like a woman, and that being like a woman is to be lesser. But what if the truth is this? To feel deeply is not feminine or masculine, it is simply human. And until men reclaim their humanity from the myth of invulnerability, they will remain cut off from the very thing they need most, each other. The real hero's journey is not slaying the dragon, it's removing the armor. It starts with a whisper, in the quiet moments between the meetings, the workouts, the beers, the scrolling. A whisper that says, this isn't enough. I feel alone. I feel unknown. Most men hear it, but almost none admit it, because admitting it feels like betrayal, a betrayal of strength, of competence, of the identity they've spent decades constructing. But here is the paradox. The very thing men are afraid to say is the thing that would set them free. To say, I feel lonely, I don't have anyone I can open up to. I want to be held, not mocked, not fixed, just held. That simple admission is revolutionary. Carl Jung taught that the individuation process, the path toward becoming a whole and integrated self, must begin with honesty. Brutal, unflinching, and for men, that means looking directly at the inner void they've avoided and naming it for what it is. A hunger for connection. In The Mask of Masculinity, Lewis Howes writes about the moment he first admitted he was sexually abused as a child. It broke him open, but it also connected him with millions. The kind that breaks the chains of shame and invites something rare into the room present. Because once he tore off the mask, he finally met other men in their truth. Not as competitors, not as performers, but as brothers. There's a hidden strength in confession, not the performative kind, but the sacred kind. Bell Hooks said, healing does not take place in isolation. Men can only heal in communion with others, and yet most men have never had that communion. They've had drinking buddies, gym partners, colleagues, but communion, soul level, presence, not in wealth, or control, or silence. It begins in a whisper of truth spoken aloud, present to the hunger for connection that has been there all along. Vulnerable honesty, that's foreign territory. And terrifying. He must have put down the sarcasm, the bragging, the detachment. He must step out of the fortress he built to keep pain out, but which ended up keeping love out, too. Because to walk into that space, a man must leave behind the weapons he's used to defend his image. But here's the beautiful truth. Power begins where pretending ends. It doesn't begin in dominance. Men don't need to be perfect to be powerful. They need to be present. Present to their needs. Present to their ache. That's not weakness. That's manhood without masks. What if the first step toward male connection wasn't therapy or confession, but a card? It may sound laughable, even ridiculous. A group of men at the bar, on the golf course, at the shooting range, pulling out a stack of questions from their pocket. And yet, maybe it's precisely that absurdity that makes the idea work. Imagine a small deck, no jargon, no therapy speak, just raw, honest prompts. When did you last cry? What scares you that you haven't told anyone? What would you say right now if you knew I wouldn't judge you? What does the little boy inside you still long for? What makes you despair when you're alone? To some, that sounds childish. To others, invasive. But beneath that resistance is the fear that it might actually open something real. Men are starving for permission to feel, and sometimes they need a tool, an object, to break through the ritual of silence. In safe environments, when one person opens up, it creates a ripple effect. Emotional honesty becomes contagious. Shame loses its grip. In the theory and practice of group psychotherapy, Irvin Yalom describes the transformative power of structured vulnerability. These conversation cards wouldn't just be gimmicks. They'd be modern-day Not every man would use them, not every setting would welcome them. But even if one man reads a question aloud and another answers it, truthfully something ancient happens. A witnessing, and that witnessing is what has been lost. Carl Jung often emphasized the importance of symbol and ritual in masculine psychology. He believed that in the absence of initiation rites, where boys are shown how to enter manhood emotionally as well as physically, modern society has left them spiritually adrift. They could become a sacred tool in secular form. Small, humble questions that pierce the armor and say, These cards could become a kind of portable initiation, not into toughness or dominance, but into depth. You are not alone. Speak can be seen. Because the problem isn't that men don't want to open up, it's that they've never been shown how. They've never been given the setting, the silence, or the signal that it's okay. These cards could be that signal. They won't change the world overnight, but maybe they'll change one moment. Maybe they'll give two men a chance to stop posturing, and start relating. And that's how the world begins to heal, not through grand gestures, but through sacred smallness. If you truly want to understand the emotional depth men are capable of, don't look at how they talk to each other, look at what they create. Read Dostoevsky and feel the trembling ache of guilt and redemption. Watch a Tarkovsky film and feel the quiet weight of existential longing. Walk through a gallery of Van Gogh's work and tell me that man didn't he weep on every canvas. Even listen to Johnny Cash at his most broken or Kendrick Lamar at his most on a stand. Hear the soul reaching for communion. Men have always been capable of extraordinary tenderness and empathy. The tragedy is that they've been trained to pour it into art, music, literature, religion, everywhere except each other. Carl Jung wrote that art is the unconscious speaking in symbols. Men, silenced by culture, have turned to symbols, paint, melody, prose to express what they could never say aloud. Their grief, their confusion, their love, their regret, their hunger for meaningful connection. But what if they didn't have to bury it in metaphor anymore? What if men were allowed to speak the same truths they paint and write and sing? But they don't, because doing so would make them appear soft, vulnerable, human, the same compassion they extend to fictional characters. Two tragic heroes, two distant ideals they are capable of offering to each other, and that, in the unwritten code of manhood, is a crime. So instead, men continue to barricade their empathy behind performance. They become providers, protectors, philosophers, priests, yet so rarely peers. They'll weep at the redemption arc in a film but never confess their own longing for a second chance. They'll quote Rumi or Marcus Aurelius or Baldwin, but never say, "I miss my father," or "I wish I'd said sorry." They'll show compassion to broken systems, failing leaders, lost causes, but not to the man beside them quietly unraveling. Because to do that would mean lowering the shield, and too many men don't know how. But it doesn't mean they can't. The capacity is there. It always has been. The masculine heart is not cold, it is caged. And the key is not more dominance, it's not more silence, it's not more self-sufficiency. It's safety, it's ritual, it's invitation. The kind of invitation that says, their lost loves, then friendship would not just be possible. It would be transformative. What you're carrying doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And there's room for your humanity here. If men can begin to extend toward each other even a fraction of the tenderness they've directed toward their art, their gods, beneath the silence, the bravado, the stoicism, there's a quiet war being fought. And most men are losing. Not to drugs or poverty, not to failure or heartbreak, but to something far more insidious. An illusion. An illusion of what it means to be a man. An illusion they never chose, but were taught to protect at all costs. This illusion says, don't be needy, don't be too emotional, don't show weakness, don't ask for help, never let another man see you bleed. And above all, so they don't know who they are anymore. They've become a character in someone else's script. A role, not a person. Instead, they defend the mask, day after day, year after year, until one day they wake up and realize, Carl Jung warned that when the persona, the social mask, becomes too rigid, the soul behind it dies, and the man becomes a ghost of himself, animated, functional, impressive, but hollow. Robert Glover calls this the nice guy syndrome, where a man becomes a polished, pleasing, agreeable version of himself that never makes waves and never makes truthful contact. He's loved for being useful, admired for being polite, but no one knows what he really thinks, or feels, or needs. Why? Because he doesn't believe he has permission to need anything. So instead of showing himself, he defends the illusion of the self-sufficient man, the emotionally bulletproof man, the always fine man. But here's the cruel twist. The more a man defends the illusion, the more alone he becomes. Because no one can love a mask, they can only admire it. And admiration is not love. It's distance wrapped in applause. Nietzsche saw this with searing clarity. He wrote, "Man is a rope, tied between beast and overman, a rope over an abyss. What pulls him into the abyss isn't failure, it's falseness. And most men fall into that abyss, slowly, so slowly, they don't even notice. They call it burnout. They call it midlife crisis. They call it boredom or work stress or I am just tired. But what it really is grief. Grief for the self they never got to be. And what makes this tragedy so cruel is that men are brave enough to face war, rejection, even death, but not brave enough, many of them, to say, I'm not okay. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to feel free. Because freedom requires breaking the illusion. And that's a kind of death they were never trained for. But here's the truth. The illusion never loved you. It only used you. Used your silence, your energy, your obedience, and gave you applause in return but never intimacy. To shatter the illusion is not the end of manhood, it's the beginning of it. For too long, men have been taught to strive for one thing above all. Control your image, control your emotions, control your destiny, control your narrative. But control isn't connection. It's a cage dressed as a crown. The real strength, the kind that builds friendships, changes lives, and heals generations, doesn't come from posturing. It comes from presence, and presence begins when the performance ends. When a man stops trying to be something and simply becomes someone. Someone who can say, I'm tired of pretending. Someone who can say, I want to be known. Someone who can finally ask, will you still stand beside me when I'm not impressive? That is the terrifying sacred doorway to friendship. Carl Jung believed that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal of life. And wholeness requires a man to make peace with the parts of himself he has banished. The fear, the longing, the guilt, the shame, the need for affection. When he integrates those parts, he becomes more than a man in control. He becomes a man at peace. The hero's journey is not slaying the dragon or ruling the world. It's returning home scarred, humbled, whole, and sitting with another man who's walked the same road. Not to compare scars, not to compete, but simply to say, you too. This is the revolution modern masculinity needs. Not louder voices, not tougher hearts, but more men sitting in rooms with no agenda other than to be real. The world doesn't need more exceptional men. It needs more honest men, more present men, more men willing to be seen fully. Because the truth is, what we call masculinity has become a disguise, and friendship can only happen when the disguise is dropped. So here's the invitation. Put down the performance, put down the polished version of yourself, put down the weight of always being okay, and offer the one thing your real friends have been waiting for all along, your truth.